Today we're talking about something that's really, really shocking. We're talking about the book, The Plutonium Files by Pulitzer Prize winner Eileen Welsome. So this talks about how in the Cold War, especially in the 40s and 50s, scientists in the US were trying as fast as possible to understand the effects of radioactive material on humans. And this led to a host of unethical experiments being conducted on people. The Plutonium Files is an incredibly shocking and detailed account of what those experiments were. It also delves into everything that is the Manhattan Project, and it's really written for the layman. So even non-scientists like me can understand what she's talking about, and it's very well written. So even though the book is called The Plutonium Files, it talks about I would say just nuclear research in general during that area. It doesn't only talk about plutonium; it talks about other radioactive materials too, uranium, iron, calcium, a bunch of other things. The whole thing is an absolute shock fest from beginning to end. I mean, it is absolutely shocking. I went into that book not knowing very much about this period, and I mean, I was totally shocked. And this is a real thing. All these nuclear experiments that were conducted on people, this was a real thing. In the 90s, President Clinton even admitted a formal apology to the victims of these experiments. But this has, I don't know, it seems like it's disappeared from general knowledge. I mean, even today we still hear a lot about the Tuskegee experiment, where, syphilis was let to proliferate in African Americans. That one is more well known, I would say. Well, this was discovered in about the same period, but we hear a lot less about it. For my part, I didn't know anything about this before reading this book. I find this period of history so interesting because it seems like scientists, because they were really on the tip of the spear, of scientific discovery, and they were in this whole new field, and it seems like they felt so more advanced than everybody that it kind of gave them free rein to do whatever they wanted. Ethical considerations be damned. And they really did whatever they wanted. They rarely bothered, if ever, to get informed consent. Really horrific experiments were conducted. It seems like being a top scientist doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with having a moral compass. It makes you wonder what scientists are doing today that people of the future will think is horrible, because this seems to be a recurring theme in history. Scientists do something that they think is great at the time, and then later on we look at it and think it's totally horrific. Who knows what's happening right now that right in the future we won't like it anymore. Without further ado, here are some of the shocking things that I read in this book, in no particular order. I just picked some examples, but honestly, the whole book is absolutely shocking from beginning to end. I mean, I was reading that book and my mouth was open. It's totally shocking. Between 1945 and 1947, in what was called the Vanderbilt experiment, 829 pregnant women were given radioactive iron. They used to call these cocktails. Mind you, the scientists that were giving these cocktails knew full well they were radioactive and never bothered to inform the pregnant women that they were being given that. And they just figured that, advancement of science. Also in the same vein, between 1946 and 1953, they gave 74 orphan boys radioactive calcium and iron in their oatmeal. This was MIT. So what they would do with all these people that were being given radioactive material is that they would collect, urine samples, fecal samples, in some cases, X-rays. What they were trying to do was trying to measure the effects of radioactivity on the human body. Between 1945 and 1947, 18 men, women, and children were actually injected with plutonium. Urine and stool specimens were collected in little jars and sent to the Manhattan Project's laboratory in Los Alamos. So in the same vein as the other experiments, scientists needed to know at what rate these materials were being excreted from the human body. In some cases, they knew perfectly well that the doses that they were injecting were very possibly lethal. They didn't seem to care very much. They tried to choose, in some cases, people that were afflicted with terminal diseases. But there were cases where finally those diseases weren't terminal at all. And the people, a lot of them died, but some of the people actually lived on for many, many years with, their plutonium injection, and they had a lot of health problems, as can be expected. So obviously, no consent was given on the part of the patients. Plutonium has an acidic taste, and we know this because somebody actually ate some. At the beginning in the Manhattan Project, at the beginning when they were starting to explore all these radioactive materials, they didn't really know so much how dangerous it is. So, they were taking minimal precautions. They had ventilation and that kind of thing. But that stuff was just floating in the air, was going on their clothes, it was going in the sewers. I mean, that whole thing, there was just radioactive material floating all over the place, and they didn't seem to care that much. It was all from the sewers. It all went into the rivers in the nearby area. It was a total mess. The material wasn't contained at all. And finally, and this one is well known, the example of the radium painters. So in the 20s, they used to think radioactive material was really cool. So they used to put this in a bunch of different products, and it was like a plus. Like, it was a good thing that your toothpaste was radioactive, let's say. So one of the things that they used to put radioactive material on was these watches. And so these women were in charge of painting the dials of the watch with a little paint that had some radioactive radium in it. And what they had to do was that, to paint the dials, they sometimes licked their paintbrush, so that the bristles would clump together and they could paint better. And some of these women, they developed like these horrible tumors all in their jaw. Many of them died. So after a while, people realized this and it became a scandal. But even with this, radioactive radium kept being unused in multiple products for years to come, like vaginal jellies and creams, elixirs, even candy. They were just putting radioactive material and all that stuff. And this was a little bit before the plutonium, scandal in the 40s. So this led to establishing those first safety standards for plutonium and other radioactive materials. So that's just a little taste of a couple of things I learned in this book. I would recommend, if you're interested in, all the Manhattan Project and all that period, especially with that Oppenheimer movie that came out recently, if you liked that, it treats a little bit of the same subject. The author does a really, really good job. And I mean, this is a real journalist. The whole thing is super well documented. I mean, she won a Pulitzer Prize for her discoveries on the plutonium experiments. So that can give you an idea. And then she went on to write this bigger book. It's extremely well written. It's written for the layperson. They even explain a little bit how all the radioactivity experiments work. Recommended if you're interested in this kind of period. And thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.